name's Dave Capin, and I'm happy they're all here. I just want to make a couple points before we really get started. Number one is, can everybody hear me? All right, number one is I'm not here. I'm in the investment business. I've been in the investment business for 28 years. I have worked for many of the large firms in the industry, including Morgan Stanley and International Securities. I am not here as a professional investment advisor. I'm here as a citizen. I am not here to solicit business, but I am here because I am an advocate of fiscal responsibility and a long-time citizen of, my whole life, frankly, a citizen of the county. All right, can everybody hear me? All right. So years ago, in 1994, Kingston had some problems, some financial problems, and got into debt, had some responsibility there, and several of my friends and I got together and said, listen, we have real estate in the community, we have our interests, and the Kingston Council said, you know what, obviously things aren't working right, maybe over your head a little bit, so we'd like to come up with a plan of recovery, and we did, and it was a 5-year plan of recovery, and the conclusion was, we went to them and said, you're not getting it done, we'd like you to adopt our plan of recovery, if you don't, we're going to put up enough money to make sure you all get knocked out. The conclusion was they adopted the plan, everything was wonderful 3 years later. And so if anybody who's from Kingston is not happy about the garbage bag fee, blame it on me. So that's how that all started. So there was some history there. So one day, Ed and I have to be at the gym, and Ed ran into me. I've known Ed my whole life. And he ran into me and said, I heard this idea about public banking. So being in the business as long as I have, frankly, I was surprised I didn't really know anything about it. And Ed asked me to do a little research. And after I did, it turned out that it's a pretty interesting concept that is valid, proven to work. It is not a cure-all, but today's session, frankly, is just an introduction to what's going to happen. We're fortunate to have Mike Krauss here, who is Executive Director of the Public Banking Institute. This is a nationwide initiative that's taking place, and there's a lot of traction that's taking place. But to set the stage, I just want to give you guys share some numbers with you about our county, and then let Mike do his thing. So, 2008 there was bailout. The industry got blown up. The financial services industry got blown up. I was not an advocate of the bailout. And here are some numbers. And by the way, Mike said to me earlier this morning that my numbers are obsolete, but I'll go with them. 2010. The total bailout was $16 trillion for the banking industry. $16 trillion total. $1 trillion went to American citizens. The rest went to banks. And the banks, then, of course, as being one of the people they are, they're hitting us with the rates of interest and so forth. They're not lending money, frankly, to people in Middle America. Of the $16 trillion, 1.2% would have covered all state deficits. Think about that. We have deficits throughout every state. We have pension problems throughout every state. And so of the $16 trillion, all we had to do was take $1.2 trillion of that budget of an allocation of the bailout. All states' deficits are gone. Why did it happen? Okay. Then we have a number which I think is also fascinating. $16 trillion bailout versus the national debt. We hear about the national debt every time we're on, turn the TV on, listen to the radio, whatever it happens to be. Sometimes we use the internet, right? $16 trillion. The national debt was $15.8 trillion. We could have wiped out the federal deficit with the amount of money that was given to the banks to survive. Anybody surprised at that? There's a big number. Now, I was just told earlier today, Mike said what, we're at 20 billion now?
22 and climbing.
22 and climbing. So I think you guys can do the math. I'm going to just give you a couple of bigger names that could be this substantial portion of money that went to some of the banks. Citigroup, 2.6 trillion. Morgan Stanley, 2 trillion. Merrill Lynch, 1.9 trillion. Bank of America, 1.4 trillion. And I can give you the list all the way down, but that's not the point. Now, I am not adverse to the banking industry, and frankly, without that, the capital out there, a lot of people in the capital in this country. But there comes a time where we have to be fiscally responsible. Just a couple more points, and I'll let Mike do his thing. If we cut out If we cut out interest, government owns to banks, we'd save between 35 to 40% of cost of public projects. It's a big number. Trillions and trillions of dollars, right? And so just think about the interest expense. Now, of course, banks are entitled to make a living, but they're not entitled to gouges. What I've done is, I was asked by Ed to take a look at a few things, and I have in front of me the debt overview for October 29th of 2013 for the county. It's going to make a couple of points. Many of you have seen this in the media, and many of you know the numbers in your heart, live with it. Our interest expense for the next, so 2027 is going to be $112 million. We have $380 million outstanding as far as debt and interest expense responsibilities. That represents between 20 and 22% of the entire budget for the county. That's a big number. I mean, before you turn the lights on, $27 million comes out the door. That's just insane. Comparatively, the city of New York is 11%. So while we're talking about substantial money and trillions of dollars difference as far as cash flow, we're talking about a percentage that is just off the charts from our county's perspective compared to what, the average government interest expense and debt service compared to their full budget. We are in a situation where we have, and I'm not here, I have no solutions. I'm going to let Frank do this thing. But another thing to think about, we have an $88 million revolving, call it a swap, municipal swap. It's not going to get the details, but the numbers go like this. We have $88 million. Up until March of this year, we were paying a 4.1% fixed rate plus 1/4% based upon some of the ratios that were agreed to by the banks and by the county. That number, that 2%, that floating portion of 1/4% went to 2.8%, just like that. Why? Because we are not reporting our financials. We are not providing the documentation necessary for banks to loan us money at a credible level. And so that number alone has raised our annual debt service just on this $88 million loan from $222,000 to $1.7 million. Just that outstanding debt alone. Okay, we're not talking about the other $100+ million. And so what I want, the points I want to make. By the way, the rate of return, the rate we're being charged on that $88 million is about 7.2%. Okay, I'm a municipal finance professional, and I got to tell you, that number is just a disgrace. You can go out right now and get 4%. Valley West School District wants to build a building, you get 4%. 7 and change is almost double. This doesn't make sense. And why does it happen now? We're not recording our financials on a timely basis. A CAFR, which is the Comprehensive Financial Report, we haven't done one since 2011. Fact of the matter is we have an obligation and it's a legal responsibility to do it before 2000, within a 6-month period by year end, so we're 2 years behind. So we can't expect the banks to just lay over and say, hey, you know what, because of a AAA rating, we're going to do 2.5%, everybody's happy. It just doesn't work that way. So we have many problems that are systemic. I'm not here to try to fix those today, but there are opportunities. And so we are fortunate to have Mike Krauss here. Mike is Executive Director of the Public Banking Institute. And he's going to talk conceptually about history, what opportunities there are, and again, this is information gathering. We're not here to bring solutions today. I am not involved in the group, but had the opportunity to get to know Mike. He's a pretty bright guy. So please welcome Mike.
Thanks, David. Thanks for putting this together there. I'll just say a pretty bright guy. I don't like the sound of that.
It's probably useful to know how people get where they get to. So let me tell you my story. I grew down in Bucks County and public schools and college here in Pennsylvania. And then I was an officer of county government and state government. And then in what I would call a galaxy far, far away at the time, long, long ago, as ED, the Public and State Committee, the focus government. And then I went off to the private sector and spent the last 30 years moving trade around the world. I've been a VP of a large trailer leasing company, trailer manufacturer, started a company in Mexico, was VP of a railroad, and I thought I knew a lot about government finance. You know, give me a residual value, and right in the time, I could probably give you a lease rate for a truck trailer out of my head. And I thought I was, a pretty sharp guy. I went off to Africa and came back in October 2008 and watched things fall apart and said, What happened here? What happened was, of course, global commerce collapsed. There are still hundreds of container ships riding empty at anchor in Malaysia. There's no cargo. Big companies are turning down delivery on multi-million-dollar next-generation container ships because they haven't got the capacity. They're all out of it. They just haven't got the freight to move. That's still going on. So I know there's been no recovery. I know this because freight's not moving. That's how I know it. But there are other ways to know this. You can walk around in American City. You can't get around Harrisburg without 6, 7 people approaching you for some money for food. Have anyone here walk around the Capitol lately? You don't have a direction. You're going to hit up 2, 3 times. That's the reality of America. I know this reality. I see it all the time. So I asked myself, what happened here? And I began to investigate, and it led me back to banking, and particularly the Federal Reserve. It is alleged that the Fed doesn't work for us. Why should it? It's a private corporation owned by banks. Its biggest owners are the biggest banks. The Fed is a private corporation. So it works for its owners. It works for the banks which own it. And all your banks here, by the way, belong to the local Fed. And our shareholders, the local Fed. But the Valley Bank and Trust Company does not have the clout or the shares that J.P. Morgan has or Citibank has. So we have a banking system that is run by the Federal Reserve for the benefit of the largest banks. That's why when the collapse happened, they bailed out the banks. That's why plus $22 trillion, still up to $56 billion a month in a subsidy, go to the biggest banks to prop up their balance sheets. Without that, they don't look so good. The stock collapses. That's the reality. The Fed props up the biggest banks to clean up their balance sheets, or they borrow the crappy mortgages, clean up those balance sheets. That's why they keep $56 billion a month still, keep those balance sheets. That's why the Fed does what it does. And it leaves us with a really dysfunctional banking system. What's the job of a banking system? It is primarily to efficiently direct credit and capital into the productive economy. That's what we want banks to do, basically. That's not what our banking system does. 7 of the biggest banks now have 60% of all the assets of the American banking system. The financial sector now accounts for 60% of all domestic American profits. If you want to know why the Congress does what the banks want, because they're the biggest game in town. They're the biggest industry in America. Banks, finance, insurance, 60% of all domestic profits. But they're not getting the job done. They're not allocating credit and capital into the productive economy. That's the problem with the banking system. When I say banks, I'm making a distinction here. There are banks and there are banks. There are the too big to fail banks, now systemically important banks. Then there's your community bank. I doubt any community bank around here was doing a lot of derivatives or credit default swaps. I doubt many banks around here were really big into subprime mortgages. I doubt that. That was all the biggest banks that have 40% of the mortgage market. They were into that kind of stuff. They drove this collapse, not just the community bank. So we have some problems. If you're a municipal officer and the county turns down, which will happen from time to time, what are your tools? You can lay off. You can cut budget services. You can raise taxes, or take on more debt. Those are the tools that the government managers have to deal with budgets right now in hard times. Lay off, cut services, raise taxes, or take on more debt. We need another tool. This is what public banking is, another tool to manage fiscal finance in a more productive and efficient way that is somewhat independent of the ups and downs of the money-centered banks. What is a public bank? Let's start there. It's capitalizing public money. It makes it a public bank. You take some of your current public assets that Wilkes-Barre will come later, that makes it a public bank, accountable to the people. That's a public bank. How does it function? As we propose it, a public bank is a partnership bank on the model of a Bank of North Dakota. It has no branches, no tellers, no ATMs, no systems, no leases, no real estate, none of those expenses. That's a different model of banking because its customer base is retail. Its customers are the local banks. And its job is to partner with the local banks in two critical areas. One, let's say you got a car dealership and you want $10 million for some new showroom. You go to your local bank, you've been banking there for 20 years, and you say, I need $10 million. And he says, our limit's 5. And you say, geez, love you, but I'll go to Wells or I'll go to Bank of America. That's how the big banks take market share. The because sometimes you've got to move your business up and past that level where your local bank can't help you anymore. In North Dakota, when that happens, go to your local bank, he says our limit's 5, you say I need 10. He said, don't go away. Let's go see if the public bank will take the other half of the deal. It's a partnership bank. The local bank originates the loan, services the loan, but the public bank comes in on the loan. Or, alternatively, you need low interest for 3 years to get your cash flows where they got to be, your business plan. You go to your local bank and say, I got to do this deal 6%. I can't do it at 6. Let's go to the local bank. The public bank can buy down the interest rate. Right now, the Bank of North Dakota is supporting 1% loan for 5 years for a broad range of businesses in North Dakota. 1% for 5 years, that's almost free money. The main function of the kind of bank we're proposing is to partner with local banks. It is not a retail bank. It does not compete with the local banks. The branches in town. And because it doesn't do that, it has a very low cost overhead. This is a low overhead kind of bank. It doesn't have all the expenses that goes right to the bottom line. That may be why the Bank of North Dakota posts a 17 to 25% return on equity year after year. And it splits its profits with the chartering government. In the last decade, the Bank of North Dakota has put $30 million a year into that state's general fund as a share of its profits from its banking activity in the community. So a public bank, as we propose it, can increase lending in the local banks, can drive down interest rates, can return profits to the chartering government, your county, your state, your city, and it stimulates economic activity, which creates taxable activity, has those benefits. There's another big benefit to a public bank that they use in North Dakota that you won't know about, and that's its impact in the bond market. North Dakota has no general obligation bonds this year, yet they're putting up a $30 million water system among other projects. Where'd the money come from? There was a 1% loan from the bank. It wasn't a 3% bond, it wasn't a 4% bond, it was a 1% loan from their own bank. The potential impact of a public bank on your bond debt is phenomenal. Debt is a big part of every government's operating budget annually. Out in California, they just built a new bridge over Bay Bridge. $6 billion plus $6 billion of interest payments over the life of those bonds. So it's a $12 billion bridge. And the taxpayers of California are paying them interest on it. Had they banked it themselves through their own bank, they could take maybe 40% out of that. The public bank can function this way in the bond market. It can bid on the bonds and drive down the interest rate. If it takes the deal, the interest you pay to your own bank. All that is captured in your own community. This is really about keeping all your money at home. If you get in the bond market like that, you bid down the interest rates, you save money. You take the deal and you pay it, you're paying it to yourself. It's right back to you. The profits your bank makes in partnering with local banks comes right back to you into your general fund. The money being invested is invested in your own community. Here are the things you want to look at when you're looking at public bank, where it is. One is mission. What's the mission of the bank? You have to think about that. Generally, it's what I just described. Participating in local banks to increase affordable credit in the community. But from year to year, your government can specify challenges. For example, in North Dakota right now, they want high-tech medical stuff. So the bank is lending into that industry. You may have read North Dakota leads the country in electronic records keeping for medical purposes. That's because the bank funded that, doing that. They're fracking. They have rural housing and water projects. The bank is heavily involved in providing housing and water system for rural North Dakota, because that's what the legislature told them to do that year. That mission can get modified from year to year. Here's what you might decide to do. In Philadelphia, they've got 40,000 vacant properties. The city owns 10,000. It's a problem. They just started a land bank, collecting all those houses in one agency instead of 4, 5, or 6. But to do what with them? To take some money. A public bank could lend the local bank to get mortgages to acquire those properties. You could do that. They're thinking about that. So the mission could be quite varied depending upon your needs. But I want to come back to first mission. You've got to think about what the mission is. Then capitalization. We'll come back to that. Then governance. This is a big one. If I said to you that I was going to give the Pennsylvania General Assembly a bank, you'd say, are you nuts? Right? I think so. That would be my response. I wouldn't do it. You want a bank that's accountable, but it can't be run by politicians. Now, here's how they do it in North Dakota. The 3 chief officers are elected: the governor, the attorney general, and the ag secretary. It's a big ag state. Then there's a 7-member board of directors, the legislature appoints. They're all bankers. They hire the CEO, he staffs the bank. And the politicians are involved only to remove from cost. You must have some accountability. You want to public money, somebody elected has got to have a say in how this bank is run. But you want bankers running the bank. That's how they did in North Dakota. I think it's a good model. We have to approach something like that any place you have a public bank in Pennsylvania. But that's a key thing. After mission and after capitalization, governance is very big. Then you want transparency. With a public bank, that's rather easy. Pick up J.P. Morgan's annual report and make sense of good luck to you. I mean, really, good luck to you. A public bank is going to be audited by the state banking department and by your controller. So the transparency is built into a public bank. That's an important factor. It's public money. You want to know where it's being spent, how it's being spent. You want to see the books. Well, you will. The banking department will look at that bank, and so will the auditor of whichever jurisdiction establishes that bank. You actually get a high level of transparency and accountability. The other thing is risk management. You want to manage risk in the bank. A public bank actually gives you enhanced risk management. Your local bank has to take the deal and like it. Then the public bank has to take the deal and like it. They've got to look at it too, independently, and say, yes, we agree on your risk analysis. That's probably why the B&D has a 3% loss ratio. It's strikingly low. That's nothing. That's remarkable. That's why. You get a double risk analysis. So, mission, capitalization, governance, then accountability, transparency, risk management. These are the key factors. Let's imagine for a second that you decide you're going to do this, okay? This is a process, and there'll have to be a discussion in this community. We're doing this in Philadelphia, in Pittsburgh, and Reading, and we don't tell anybody what their mission is. We want to help that process, but you're going to decide that. We're going to put a bill on the council's desk in Philadelphia later this year. We're going to suggest capitalization. They'll have their own ideas. We're going to suggest governance. That's big with us. We really want to have to say about that. But they're doing the thing. Let's come back to capitalization. That's really important. Most cities and states, most counties, townships, boroughs, cities, this Commonwealth, are up against it. In hard times, we're broke, there's no money. That's simply not true. What you have to look at is not your budget, but what they refer to, your consolidated annual financial report. That's where the money's squirreled away. It turns over year after year for different agencies and commissions and boards. Pennsylvania, Philadelphia broke. Philadelphia Schools sits on $12.2 billion of investments. $12.2 billion of investments. They have the pension board has 100 fund managers managing those investments. And you read through the report, the footnotes, and it's striking information. It discusses how they deal with the risk of foreign currency. And you go, foreign currency? It means that not only is that money not invested in Philadelphia, it's not invested in Pennsylvania, it's not invested in the United States. That's what that means, foreign currency risk. Their pensions are invested outside the city. I'll bet yours are too. I'll bet very little pension money comes back to this city. Well, is that a wise thing? What we're going to say in Philadelphia is, well, you got 12.2 billion investments. Scandinavian hedge funds and who knows what else. Take some piece of that. And instead of this underperforming investment, this hedge fund that never outperforms the S&P, never, ever. Instead of this 3 or 4% return, take that and make it an equity position in a bank as a part of your investment portfolio. Now, instead of a stock option or a hedge fund or a money market or short term, you've got shares of the bank, and you get that return. Did I mention in North Dakota, 17 to 25% attractive return these days? So we're saying it's prudent in terms of capitalization just to diversify your retirement funds. Some piece of that pension money over here. Bucks County, by the way, just took a small change. They took $4 million this year to work with one of their authorities. That's nice. You'll get a good return there. But that's a small change. We're going to take a substantial chunk and put it over here to capitalize the bank. Now, you don't have to do that. You can capitalize the bank with a bond issue. That's debt. You want some more debt. It's self-liquidating because the bank pays that off. But what happens is your returns get depressed. You know, you're here for 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, and you start doing this. That's if you've got debt to pay off. If you're not paying off debt, you start to do this. What is this? This is the amount of money you're returning to the general fund in non-tax revenue. It's the amount of jobs you are creating. and it's the reduction of your debt service. There have been 3 great studies about this here in the U.S. so far. Vermont is one. Last week, or the week before, 20 towns up there voted to instruct their legislators to be in favor of public bank. It's Vermont, town meeting, how they do it. I think they actually approve their budgets, hire people right on the spot. It's like it was, 20 years ago. They still do that. So they've instructed legislators to work with it. They will. And of course, the banks are opposed to big banks. Obviously, the suits will descend on Mount Clear, Manhattan, rather like the power suit where it died. And they'll come and tell these folks what to do. We'll see what happens. New Mexico, Arizona are moving that way, but in Vermont, the Political Economy Research Institute at Massachusetts, UMass Amherst, did the study, 30 pages. And they calculate the number of jobs we created over 2, 3, 5, 7 years, the impact on debt service, returns to the state. That has to be done. Same thing is done in Washington or Oregon by the Center for State Innovation. You can go to like a official and say, have I got a deal for you? And Ed here, I got to vote on this. It's public money. So just, this is a nice idea, give me $50 million. It's not going to fly. So this must be thrown out and investigated. This is a process. It will take some time. We assist in that process. That's our job. But nevertheless, it's got to be black and white. What we want to bring forward in this county is a business plan and approach the elected officials like investors in a startup, which in fact it is. And think about it, it's a good deal, but still, as elected officials, you want to be careful about public funds. So let me come around all the way to the beginning again and just describe what I think is the need. I think we all know the need. I think we all know that the country is not recovered. If you travel the world like I do, and you come back to the United States, it almost looks like a third world country. The bridges are falling down. There are very poor people in the streets all over the place. There's real hunger in America. Poverty is growing in America. Schools where kids don't have books or computers or nurses. What? What the hell's happening? So we all know there's something very wrong in America. Okay? I think we also know that the help's not coming from Washington. I mean, have you seen it yet? And like I said on Harrisburg, I think we do this ourselves, but it doesn't get done. We really need something different to move this country forward, so to recover some of the lost prosperity. I'm 64, so I had a pretty good most of my life. I had great schools, nice community, lots of opportunity, and life was good. I was in Pittsburgh last weekend. And there were these kids coming out of really fine schools with degrees, working at Walmart, and owe $125,000 in student debt. They would, if that stays the way it is, they will never achieve what I achieved. They just won't. They'll start out 10 years behind me, and they will never, ever catch up. If they ever get a home, they'll be 50. If they ever get one. They may wind up renting one of the lots. That's a nice deal. First you foreclose all the homes, then you buy them from the banks at above market prices, then you sell them back at below market prices, and they rent them out to you. That's a nice deal. That's $7 trillion worth of housing rent that way in the United States. And then 15 years they'll flip it, and they'll take they'll take it as capital gains. This is a really nice deal for somebody, but not for those kids in Pittsburgh. It's a crummy deal. Just wait. Just wait. Watch the streets. You've got seniors with their pensions being eaten alive. Social Security, maybe increase, maybe cut down. Medical costs going through the roof. A lot of really poor seniors and a lot of really poor debt-strapped young kids. That's a ticket for some kind of explosion. Something's got to give. Something's got to give. Well, you can do something about that. We can do something about that. We can move the nation forward, acting locally. Forget Washington. This is what I have. Harrisburg, who knows? You can do it. Philadelphia can do it. Pittsburgh can do it. Bucks County can do it. We can create a network of public banks to provide an alternative to the money center banks, which frankly have abandoned banking. If you look at the business lines of Morgan Stanley, Citibank, lending is now about 28% of their business. That's not their business anymore. Their business is swaps, derivatives, wealth management, commodities, bringing the markets, bringing the library, bringing the bond market, bringing this, bringing that. That's their business. They made fraud a business model. Well, who's going to expand that credit? It can be done locally. You can do that. a public banking infrastructure to attack the problems you want to see attacked. And by the way, start returning some non-tax revenue to your general fund, stimulate development and job creation, which means more tax revenue to your general fund, and take a chunk out of your debt service. And that comes right to your annual operating budget. So we think this is a really good idea. There's a model. In the rest of the world, by the way, public banking has 40% of the market. Unknown in America. The countries that didn't melt down, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, they have Japan, Germany, long established substantial public banking sectors. They were cushioned against the meltdown. They didn't melt down. We did. We have an entirely privately run banking system managed at the top for the benefit of a very few small, gigantic so-called banking institutions. We need alternatives to that. So we think this is the alternative. We're going to work with this community and any community, frankly, to share what we know, look at the models of other places, mostly North Dakota, where the bankers are very, very happy about their public bank. Their community banks are taking back market share. I will go 2 banks in North Dakota. We interviewed them. And the one guy, small bank, said, when the crunch hit, the B&D, Bank of North Dakota, never blinked and the credit kept flowing. There were no bank failures in North Dakota. No one put into bailout. And the regional guy said, with the B&D as a partner, we go toe-to-toe with the big boys, meaning Wells and Bank of America and those guys. That's why the banks in North Dakota are taking back market share. It's a very healthy banking industry. Healthy banking industry. Healthy economy. And for those of you who are going to say, yeah, they got oil, we'll sow the wind. So what the hell happened? Well, why don't we fly right along with 2% unemployment, rising incomes? Clearly, the bank matters in North Dakota. We think it matters here. So with that, I'd like to take questions. That's what I'd like to take questions. Yes, sir.
My question, on a more concrete level, we got $300 million in this, and that's over about 27 million a year. Tell me, how would you go about doing it, especially with 20 bonds we have on there, so are not powerful. Walk us through that.
The question Mike raised and the thing that Dave alluded to is you currently have substantial bond debt. The bank is not going to relieve that tomorrow. It doesn't work that way. If you were to capitalize a bank and get it to work, the returns, the money, the profits going back to the general fund come up over, 2 to 3, 5 years. The jobs creation comes up just the same way, 2 to 5 years. It could impact on new bond issues. That it could do, but it's not going to eliminate the bond debt that you have immediately. That's not going to happen. I'm not promising that. It can, in time, as the bank gets established, maintains its reserves, gets its base, then starts to get into the bond market. As a bidder, for one thing, or a buyer, or a lender. Once you get your own bank, instead of doing a bond issue, you can borrow from your bank at 1%. And that 1% is right back to your bank. All the money stays at home. So this is not a quick fix for debt service. This is that. This is a play for the future, no question about it. And the results come on over time. I don't want to promise, quick profit. Yeah, we got it.
Mike, we talked earlier today that, it's not something that gets fixed overnight, right? But let me just give you a couple of scenarios here. First of all, our fixed versus variable rate ratio, we have 63% of our outstanding debt is fixed. 36 is variable. The bond I mentioned earlier, that's series internal, the $88 million. That $88 million is a variable rate, and that's why it went from 1% to 2.8, because the banks felt that we have more financial risk, and therefore they have to protect themselves in case we default. Okay? So there are ways to restructure that. Again, we're not here to get into the heavy detail, but mathematically, I just want to share again with you that we went from $122 million of debt service to $1.7 million in March. Okay? And so there is a concept that is, I'm just going to take a macro concept. So we have a couple $100 million pension plan. And of that, 10% of it is in derivatives. 10% of it is in alternative investments, which are very aggressive. Sometimes they do well, sometimes they don't. Let's assume you take 10% of the pension, which then is $20 million. Okay? That $20 million can be then loaned out or to be used as collateral like the banks do for 10 times of that amount of time, right? So that's what the banks do. You take $10 million, you now have $100 million conceptually that you could potentially refinance this $88 million debt. Here's the problem. This swap that we did with JP Morgan, right now on the books, is showing a $14 million loss, which means we have to buy that loss back. And what Mike was suggesting earlier was banks are making money. We're taking a hit, we're paying for it. So there are ways in which we approach it fundamentally, and it has to be accepted first and structured properly. So it's not going to be like flip the switch.
No questions, must be solved. Please.
Is this a state charter or federal charter? And the second part of my question is, I'm on a bank where for municipal deposits, we have to collateralize them with government, either security, municipal bonds. How do you get around that part of it?
The two really is questions. Will they get a state charter or federal charter? We would prefer a state charter, or we would go for either. The reason is that the Pennsylvania banking firm is actually rather good. And the banks here get a lot more scrutiny from our regulators than JP Morgan gets from the Fed, believe me. It's a pretty solid banking firm. Full life, the secretaries come and go, the CF's been there forever. And they're pretty solid. So we like the state charter. The state charter generally means you're going to be FDIC insured. But this bank is not taking retail deposits. It's not retail. We're not looking for retail customers here. This is not meant to compete in any way with a local bank. So we're discussing with the state whether or not that's really applicable, because this is not a retail bank.
You take your municipal deposits, correct?
Now municipal, this is the important part. In North Dakota, as the gentleman said, to take municipal funds, you've got to collateralize. You've got to show them the money. So typically, you run to the big banks because, hey, we got plenty of money. That's not really clear that it's got your name on it. But theoretically, they seem to have the money there. So you, like Reading has money in Wells. Philadelphia's got $400 million deposit from JP Morgan, or City of Wells, actually. In North Dakota, the state bank holds all the state's money. Everything. It's a DBA. It's North Dakota New Business as the Bank of North Dakota. Every asset, every land, building, Microscope University, all the tax receipts are in their own bank. So the $250,000 of collateral is paid out the door. They're holding millions of the state's money. And they don't come out, they self-insure. The other thing though the bank does is it provides letters of credit to local banks that hold municipal deposits. So for example, Reading has this money out of the Wells because Fulton Bank doesn't want to set aside $20 million of its capital. It's not always that deposit. In North Dakota, Fulton would get a letter of credit from the state bank to collateralize that loan, and then they can take those deposits, not tie it to its own capital. That's a kind of a banker's bank service. The public bank, when it's mature, can do any number of things. One is that the public also does stock swaps with the local banks to help with their liquidity. It's also a secondary market for mortgages. The state bank is buying mortgages from local banks to increase their liquidity. So this is a banker's bank, actually. And it has lending functions, but it also works closely with local banks to support them. Yes, sir.
No, but I think Attorney Rogers' question was, under Act 72 in Pennsylvania, you have to collect the power with 102%. But it's not retail.
Is it a special charter?
The license was that, as it works now, the Bank of Code is providing letters of credit.
Pennsylvania.
Look, there's stuff
Under Act 72 in Pennsylvania, you have to collateralize it 100%, according to Act 72.
If you're holding the deposits. Right, okay. Well, and most local banks can afford that. But they can get a letter of credit from the state bank to take that piece of it as long as they want, whether outside it. Yes, good. Of course, there's a fee involved in that. That's the question of that. That's the normal banking. I didn't say the bank gave its service away. I said they turned profits to the state. Obviously, it's making money someplace. But it is not. It doesn't need the profit margins that a commercial bank needs. The chief officer of Bank of North Dakota, $6 billion, earns $250,000 a year as a state employee. That's it. No one's paid a bonus or a commission to do stupid things. There's no incentive to take bad deals. That's why we have that low default ratio. Again, the bank's model eliminates an awful lot of operating costs and pulls right to the bottom line. That's how it's able to participate with low rent and still return a profit to the state. Now, this will be, it's a bank. You have to run it like a bank. And your business model will be muster. But I'm saying it's been done. There's a model working that accommodates, need to return profits to the state. And the ability to participate in local banks to give them affordable credit. This is, I think, is rather simple. Most Americans don't have any wealth. Maybe they still got a home, maybe they still got a car, but over 90% of American people don't have any wealth. They don't have savings, they don't have stocks, they don't have bonds, they're living on the edge. It's most Americans. How do you get ahead? Try it this way. It's tough to be a capitalist without capital. You must have affordable, if you're a North American, you must have affordable credit. Education, get your first home, start a business, you must have affordable credit. Where's it going to come from? The source needs to be sustainable. It can't be appropriations. Every year the state's going to pump, 60, 80, 100 million bucks into this agency or that. That's tax money. This is a sustainable source of affordable credit, distributed through existing banking infrastructure to drive economic development, jobs creation, and have an impact on your municipal finance, give them a tool you don't now have. So that when the next downturn comes, it will be one sooner or later, always is, it won't have to be just layoffs, or just budget cuts, or new taxes, or more debt. You have a bank. You own your own bank. The best way to beat the banks is to own your own bank. Get partners with your own banking industry to do this all from the bottom up. More questions?
I think I get it now. It's like a version of Federal Home Loan Bank, but it's on a smaller scale. That's we buy with collateralized deposits with Federal Home Loan Bank with a letter of credit. They have a bond program where you buy down interest rates for the first. So it's kind of like it's our Federal Home Loan Bank. Correct.
You could look at it like a mini Federal Reserve. A mini Federal Reserve.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Your own credit source. Let me come back to credit. Everything's about credit. Now we say. I said, they gave, Wall Street gave the Fed $22 trillion. Did you see the parade of nose-to-nose tractor trailers up and down 95 for a week to get their $22 from Washington to Wall Street? No, you didn't. It was a keystroke. That was $22 trillion from a computer. They created credit on their books. That's what banks do. 97% of all the money in circulation here is credit. Created by a bank loan. That's where our money comes from. It's not cash. You go to a bank and they'll say, here's your loan for $100,000. Do they count out $100,000 for your home? Of course not. It's an entry, a ledger entry. That's what banks do. They create credit on their books based on their reserves. Now smart banks, keep it 8 to 1, 9 to 1, 10 to 1. When Merrill went down, they were leveraged 42 to 1. Of course they went down. By the way, in derivatives, Morgan, Citibank, they're leveraged 200 to 1. And the next London whale takes out not 6, but $60 billion. And they start collecting the debts, and the chairs start moving like individual chairs. Somebody ain't going to have a chair when that dance is done. And there won't be 5 big banks, there'll be 3. And the concentration will get worse and worse. Let me close with this. My interest is democracy. I love my country. I like to think in democracy. But I don't govern people. Here's government 101. Political power flows from wealth. Whether it's Rome, or the British Empire, or America, or I don't care where it is. Political power flows from wealth. When you concentrate wealth, you concentrate power. If you want to know why you can't get a damn thing done in Washington, it's because all that power has been concentrated in the hands of all that wealth. That's it. That's why nothing changes. That's why your vote doesn't matter. That's why elections are bought. That's why campaign financing is a system of legalized bribes. That's why. What do you do about that? Well, attacking Washington head-on is futile. Believe me, they've dug in. It's just not going to happen. So an end run seems to me like a good idea. If I were general, and I saw those guys, I'd say, I think I want to go right. And we're left, but not like those guys. They really dug in. So just end run those guys. That's what public banking can do. This nation's strength is still the same as it was, tremendous diversity. Tremendous diversity. I've been around the world. There's nothing like this country. If you can enable that diversity, you do almost anything, in my opinion. public banking is a way for you to enable your own economy the way you want. When you get, by American thing or by government thing, Mao Zedong, whether the flowers bloom, just Mao said, yeah, right. Let's get a public bank here, a public bank there, a public bank, each one doing what it wants to do, what's appropriate for its community. That's America. Get lots of diversity, lots of different ideas out there. We want to work, many will. We can harness that diversity. We can move this country forward again. You can do it locally. It's not going to get done in Washington. It just isn't. They're bought and sold more again. It just isn't. So what do we do? Nothing? No. Do it ourselves from the bottom up. So that's the message I want to carry. We're working together. That public banking is all about you taking control of your money in your community and putting it to uses you want in a sustainable way to move your country, and this community forward.
How do you get it started?
Well, probably what you want to do is assemble a team and look at these different elements. For example, in Philadelphia, we have one group of folks addressing mission, and they're talking to the neighborhoods, the churches, the CDC, the community groups, the civic organizations, getting a sense of what they think the most useful thing for that city to do. That's one line of analysis. Then someone else has got to look at it, as Dave's got to do with this stuff. You look at the money. Where is your money? What money you actually have? Rainy day fund? Get rid of it. It's invested to 0.29% in your own bank. A little more money. And then you've got an emergency, you borrow from the bank. This example, North Dakota, Grand Forks Fire and Flood, 1997, wiped out Grand Forks, North Dakota, Grand Forks, Minnesota, the other bank of the river. In North Dakota, the public bank was in with $100 million of emergency funds before FEMA was on the ground. And you folks have floods here, do something about flooding, right? So, okay. Before FEMA showed up, the bank had $100 million. Then the bank underwrote a 6-month suspension of mortgage payments for that town. Then the bank put $100 billion of low interest money back into that town. And here's the result. Grand Forks, North Dakota, after all that distress, lost 3% of its population. Grand Forks, Minnesota, which had none of these things, lost 17% of its population. Never recovered. Didn't have a public bank to step in with cheap money when times were tough. That's, by the way, that's something that a public bank can do. Disaster relief. I'm going to see California do the same speech and say, disaster relief, we're not worried about that. And I say, well, you outlawed earthquakes? California, you're going to have a disaster along with someone like this. You want to think about this. You want to think about that. A public bank can participate in disaster relief with cheap money. That's the name of the game. Wall Street gets its money at less than 1% and loans out at 6 or 7 with credit card 20, 30%, whatever the hell it is. That's it. And your local banks can't get their money that cheaply. It's leverage. Your local banks go to the money market just like Wells does, but they don't get the same rates. It's all about, and that drives up the cost of their product to you, because they don't get their money at 0.5%. They're not big enough to get that money like that. But you've got your own bank department. You can have the local banks drive down their costs of doing business. Another advantage. Any other questions? Thank you very much. We are here to help. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for coming. If you have any questions, please address them to me. I'll forward them to people who I hope to get the answers for you.
Let me tell you, I really
establishing
saying that
some sort of force between I and Kathy and Eileen, our council, and we're going to have hopefully the whole council the opportunity to hear most of what they're saying and ask for additional help. I appreciate your time. Thank you very, very much.
Dave,